Now I want us to think about this. A lot of you young ones can't wait to grow up so you can be grown, but really don't understand what grown means. Grown means responsibilities. Amen. What kind of responsibilities? Enormous amount of responsibilities. You actually have more freedom in your youth than you do as an adult. And as an adult, if you do not live by the guidelines or the discipline, then you will suffer greatly. See, you're protected by your parents when you're young. Some of y'all won't even see a jail cell or anything, and we pray that you never will. But when you grow older as an individual, when you break the rules, they have a place for you. When you grow older as an individual, they have a place for you of suffering or overwhelming feeling. And I want to hear some testimonies from people that are transitioning from the childhood into adulthood. Anybody have a testimony? And one of the glory of the Creator. And after that, explain how life has changed for them. Anybody?
Okay.
Hallelujah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm not grown at all, but I have transitioned from teenager to young adult, and that I am in a different area. I'm away from family, on my own, at school, so it's a struggle kind of to stay like, I don't know, what's the word? Focused, thank you. Stay focused. Because I'm around all these people who don't know the Most High, and so they're always like, oh, there's a party Friday night. And I'm just like, well, I'm not going. My roommate, she gets it. She understands it. She helps me out and tells people that I can't do this. And then she's always asking me what I can and can't do. And about like this way of life. And then me telling her helps me to remember it and know more and know better. So she's on my tail too. And have like as the Sabbath coming in. Well, she knows. Well, I know, but hey, she's there to help me out. And it helps that you have someone to help you out. I also call Alfani on the Shabbat or Arnold or my email, so I want someone to talk to. And then if I cannot make it out to the congregation that's out there in Atlanta, I will watch Shema or get on Facebook and see and that helps. But just about staying focused and remembering the Most High and following His laws. And then, other than that, life's as is.
Yeah. We got one more.
I got a testimony. When you're younger, you don't see all like stuff that when you're young, you don't see all like the stuff that your like parents and stuff go through all the time. But me, I'm in school and stuff, so I have to pay for my stuff on myself and stuff. Like it's like you don't see all the hurdles that your parents and stuff go through, like the adults go through. Like when you get through one like hurdle, there's gonna be another one that's keep coming after that. And then as a child, you might get like one little bump in the road, but after that, it's pretty easy sometimes. But as you get older, and like as an adult, you get hurdles after hurdles and hurdles that you have to keep going through. You can't just always be worried about one hurdle because the next one after that. So it's stuff like that, and it's also like you gotta be mindful of what you're doing, like just like buying like simple stuff like soap and stuff. You gotta like read the ingredients and stuff like that. You might not be accustomed because your parents always buy stuff for the house or something like that. So it's like just simple stuff like that you take for granted, that you just look over because you live in a household that you have to do by yourself independently.
Hallelujah. Okay.
So I'm hearing what I feel like being in school and having to pay for my own everything and having my own phone bill and like my own bank account. And like I didn't know that if you was in the negative for a long time, that you couldn't get a bank account for like 7 years. Not too I was told that, but I did not know that. I thought getting negative, just pay it and get out. But you have to pay it before someone else. I didn't know that, but just wanted to say that. And also for like the little children, y'all don't value. I feel like y'all don't value sleep. Y'all want to stay up. Sleeping is sleep. You need it because then you'll have to get up at 8 a.m. Well, 7 to go to your 8 a.m. class. Naps. And those naps, yeah, they may never feel. Y'all need to. Then y'all just don't understand like the value of sleep or the value of listening to your parents because they tell you stuff that they want for what's best for you. And then you gotta listen to these other adults. They may not want the same things for you, but knowing your parents, knowing what they told you, you gotta listen to them because you know that's gonna get you where you need to be.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah. All honor, all glory to the supreme intellect, and I thank them for the testimonies. And I want to get into that, and the reason why I asked for testimonies because I had a few revelations of the Sabbath day today. And it was really impactful. Like, you know, entering the WaYakwel uses the juxtaposition of the Sabbath and the creation of the tabernacle to create malakot or malakot or to define what can't we do on the Sabbath. So they come up with 39 laws of what you can't do on the Sabbath. But I'm going to kind of reverse that and flip that a little way to show you from a spiritual level what you should do on the Sabbath. And many adults will tell you that you think that you're just going to cruise into the Sabbath and it's just the most comfortable day in the world. And sometimes that's when controversy rears its head. That's when you're being challenged. That's when at times you start to want to express yourself or explain yourself to others. And I want to go into Exodus, the 35th chapter. I need a reader. Somebody can read for me, Vaksha.
I got you.
Hallelujah. And if you can read loud, that'd be helpful. Shemot 35. And I started to understand the placing of the scriptures today. The scriptures put stuff in order for a reason. Many of you are just run through it and we just say, oh, that was beautiful. I loved it. I read the portion this week. But you're really not understanding the positioning of the Creator and why He has put certain words in the mouths of the prophets to understand what is going on today. Okay, hallelujah.
Moses then convoked the whole Israelite community and said to them, these are the things that the Lord has commanded you to do.
All right, let's stop. So the portion is called WaYakwel this week, right? And we heard all the breakdowns about WaYakwel and so many things about, like we said, the juxtaposition of the Sabbath and the building of the tabernacle. But let's just go into the word WaYakwel. The root word is what? Anybody know the root word to this? You had the Y on the end of it, on the front of it, what is it? And, right? And you add a yod on the end of the front of a verb, what is it denoting? He. So, and he, quahal. What does quahal mean?
To convoke, to assemble.
To convoke, all right? To assemble, right? But the denotative meaning, and this is what some people don't understand. Sometimes I go to the literal meaning, and then I go to the connotative meaning, which we understand as assembly. But it's the voice of a shepherd. That's the real meaning. Right? Quahal means a shepherd or to gather. What does a shepherd do? Gather his flock. So you got to remember that our interpretation of this Hebrew is based off of a pastoral lifestyle. So when we look at it, we got to look back from the minds of our forefathers. See, we could easily take these scriptures and break it down in English and think it just means one thing or this and that, but we're not really getting the true essence. So let's use this word quahal. You got the word qual, which means to gather or shepherd, right? And then you have the word quo, right? We say voice. Because what happens when the shepherd calls, the flock comes. As soon as that shepherd comes, the flock start coming because they think it's what? Who said that? Feeding time. They think it's time to eat because the shepherd about to what? Feed the flock. So now keep this in mind. Who was our shepherd? The Creator. So now he talks about a proclamation on the Sabbath where he called all his flock to come together. It's feeding time. It's a spiritual nourishment that we are about to accept. So also from that word, anybody heard the word WaYakwel? What does that mean? Staff, word? WaYakwel means staff. Why? Because the shepherd holds the staff. And this makes sense because now if we go into the scriptures, we start to understand with the prophet Navi Moshe that when there was a war and Moses had to hold up his arms, that when his arms came down with the staff inside of his hand, our people failed in this war because when we talk about it, the raising of the staff or the shepherd is to rally the people. So now you're starting to get the understanding of the Sabbath. The Sabbath is about rallying the people. It's about a call from our divine shepherd to come and assemble. And there's going to be many obstacles to tell you not to assemble today. My emotions, my feelings. I don't feel like it. But the Sabbath is not about feelings or emotions. It's a divine assembly for who?
Most High.
All the Most High's people. And we got to think about that. Because it's not a calling of Yashuvel or Rav or Yosef or anybody. It's a calling of Yah. And I took titles off for a purpose. It's a calling of a divine entity. So now when he says gather or invoke yourself, it's the calling of our shepherd. So now it's not about you just chilling at home and getting peace of mind. It's about coming together because all the flock needs to come together. Everybody needs to assemble on the Sabbath day, right?
That's what I'm hearing. Hallelujah.
And then he says, speaks to the community of Bnei Israel, Adat. And I like this because Kohal was the name of Mori Mishael camp, right? And he emphasized gathering on the Sabbath, correct? Okay, it's the law. And they emphasize, our elders emphasize. Then there's Adat, which is another congregation, right? Bini Adat, which means what? Adat. We read it to be what? Congregation, right? But the root word is aid. What does aid mean? Witness, a testimonial. So now you start to get deeper into what the Sabbath is about. It's a little more than that. It's just not about congregating and coming together. It's about testifying and witnessing the glory of who? The Most High.
Absolutely. Hallelujah.
Even in Islam, the Arabs, they call a festival at the end of certain things the Eid. Because they're supposed to be coming together and they're testifying about the glory. But they just translate Eid as celebration. But celebration is more than a celebration. It's a celebratory aspect on coming and testifying about who Yah is. So when you take your Sabbath day, now you're having a holy gathering that's called by the shepherd who is Yah. And then you have the Eid to balance you. Always testifying on the Shabbat how good God is. So now in your day, you just need to take and think about it. It's not about how you feel about this brother, this sister, your husband, your wife. It's not about that. It's about testimonial to give glory to God. And that's what we have to consider. You can have your feelings. You can have your emotions. But this is not what that day is about. It's a testimonial. You're witnessing the Almighty. You're coming together in the presence of the Creator to understand His greatness. All right, let's continue in the reading.
On 6 days, work may be done, but the seventh day you shall have a Sabbath of complete rest, holy unto the Lord. Whoever does any work shall be put to death.
All right, so now we have to understand the circumceptive rhythms, which means that the body is in line with the 7-day cycle, which we always talk about, right? But I want to get into why is it important, because a lot of times our life and the depression that we're in and the state that we're in, and we're in the over-anxiety community. Our communities, everybody's anxious. Do you notice that most of our people in the age of 30 are having symptoms of heart attacks, strokes, if they're not having one? Because the anxiety is built up. This is a ramped up community because we're overthinking certain things. And what are we focusing on? We're focused on the negativity. How many of us in our day we just focus on negative aspects of what's not happening in our life? We look at somebody else's life and we be like, I want this, I want that. But then the person that you're looking at is not happy. And they looking at you like, I want what they have. Huh? Because the grass is green on the other side is just an illusion. It's just an illusion. So now God is telling you, testify his greatness, because if you're testifying and you're a witness to his glory, then you don't have time to think about negativity on the Sabbath. It gives you a balance. It gives you a balance on who you are, because now you have to balance your life, because all throughout that week you're thinking about all the bad things. What you don't have, what you need. And that's the whole backdrop of life. We think life is just this beautiful thing that comes to us, but life is a beautiful experience. There's a difference in beauty and beautiful experience. We have to experience the ups and downs of life in order to be able to accept where we're going in life. So when bad comes, if you understand Yah, you know that bad is also what? Good. It's a blessing. You have to learn. Let's look at life as this divine supermarket where you go in there and you want to make a cake, right? And you need all the ingredients to make a cake. Life won't let you out that door until you have what? All the ingredients. So you're frustrated. You're trying to break the door open. You're mad. I want this door to open up, instead of focusing on what you're missing and what's going on in life. Why are you trapped in a cycle? Why you can't get out of this cycle? Because life's supermarket will not open up. And that's how beautiful God is. He got a good supermarket. It won't open up until you figure out what you're missing, what ingredients you don't have. Now I want us to all consider that. So now, they gave us the things that we couldn't do on the Sabbath, but I'm telling you the things that you should be doing on the Sabbath. When you find yourself in a slump, when you find yourself antisocial, don't want to deal with nobody, you have to realize that you have to give glory to God and testify to his greatness. And watch how it works. Well, I don't got this, I don't got that. Nobody like me. Man, God is good. Hallelujah.
Can I give testimony?
Hallelujah.
In reference to what you just said. As everybody here should know, or don't know, I'm going to let you know. I've been going through transition since something happened to me back in October. And I've been going through a lot of transition throughout that period up to now. And been trying hard to get myself reorganized, refocused, and try to get back to a place of balance, get back to a place of neutrality, get back to a place where I could begin all over again. And it seemed I couldn't do it. So I started asking people to help me on a financial level, spiritual level, or whatever help I could get to try to get over it. And I trusted more in people, whether they could give me than trusted in the Most High. You know, and the fact that some denied me, some did this, some did that, it doesn't really matter. But the fact is that I didn't trust God. I didn't trust him at all. I trust man more because I needed financial help. I needed this, and I needed so much, you know, that I was overwhelmed. But even old people, grown men cry too, because I cried at night because I didn't know what to do. I've asked people to help me, I asked people to do this, and they just wouldn't come through. I don't know why. Maybe most times or not to, whatever the case may be. But I didn't trust God. And the other day, I you know, when I was going over my sorrows, I realized, you know, that whatever people do doesn't really matter It's what God does. And he saw me through it. He saw me through it. I'm no longer homeless. I was homeless before. I'm no longer homeless. The Most High gave me an apartment. The Most High helped me when I thought no one else was going to help me. But he came and he made me persevere and he made me successful in what I was trying to do. You know, so that's my testimony today to the Most High, is trust the Most High regardless of what you're going through, regardless of how you feel or what other people do or don't do. Trust him and he'll pull you through like he pulled me through. Hallelujah. Praise the Most High.
Okay.
Nancy, I want to ask a question, right?
Praise God.
True life and true conversing with different people, and through the spiritual journey, most people say that the things we do or don't do is for Yah. And my awareness, Yah is complete. So I'm saying to myself, if it's the reverse, if people or us come to the awareness, because this is my reality, that the benefit of the things that I do, which is the structure that the Creator creates for us, the universal structure, the reward is for me. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So I'm looking at it in reverse. Instead of we tell the young sons that you're doing it for Yah, Yah is complete. Mm-hmm. You do Yah is the concept. You're doing it, but the reward is yours.
Hallelujah.
You getting the reward. You not doing it, you're not getting the reward. So that's a reversal, because a lot of people be like, well, I'm doing it for God, I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for God. Like I'm saying, you remove that from Nazi. But if I'm seeing when I move the concept for you, I'm moving it for me, then I will understand and moving it more so. So that's what my reality is. I'm thinking that we need to just be, because God is complete, the Creator is complete. So the reward is always ours.
Oh yeah.
Always ours.
Oh yeah. So
we need to just step up and do what we gotta do in the Creator's concept, but the reward is ours. It's all reward. We need to get up, step up, complete the task at hand, and get the reward.
Hallelujah.
So that's all I think.
Hallelujah. So now, I'll interject with a testimony. And I pray that the Most High guides my mom to speak that which is right. My testimony is that, and maybe a little different than others, but I always felt I was abandoned. And that was just an illusion in my mind. Because when I really think about it, I have some of the best brothers in the world that Yah can give. To give that support. And to allow us to grow. And I really have to say that because sometimes we go through life and we always complain about things we don't have and what we need. But Yah aligned us all together today to build something that was miraculous. Miraculous. And is there a little cliques or confrontation every now and then? Absolutely. But if it's working, then that means Yah aligned us with something that is powerful. So the sense of abandonment that I had is just the false reality that I created because I can't see the true blessing of what God and Yah has put before me. If there was any help I ever needed, I received it. And not always from a divine intervention or everything is divine intervention, but sometimes you have to be able to respect the intervention that comes from the hand of man, that God inspired it, because the brothers that I know, that I feel and I call my friends, have given me life through the Almighty. Hallelujah. So I'm here. And I'm here because I have a brother to say, you gotta do this. I'm here because I got a brother to say, you need to do this. Or it might not even say it, but just shows an example on how it should be done. I'm here because of everything that Yah has planned for me to build his nation. So I thank Yah for that, and as a testimony to myself, because at times we feel like we by ourselves and we don't have, but we always have. Sometimes we don't respect what we have. And that's the difference. So all praises to the supreme intellect of the universe. Continue, King.
You shall kindle no fire throughout your settlements on Shabbat days.
All right, so now it goes in. So automatically it talks about the Sabbath, right? And it puts in beautiful words. It says, Adat b'nei Israel. It talks about the Qahar, which we touched on. But now it talks about kindling fire. Now this is funny because me and my son, we were studying this week and we were talking about fire, right? Why fire in this portion? And you can come up with many understandings, breakdowns, because sometimes it's based off of perception and reality on how you perceive things. So when I looked at it, you have to realize that fire represents man. If you look at the word Ish, it's similar to Aish. See, most Hebrew letters, we always assume that they're three-letter roots, but these three-letter roots come from two-letter roots. Just like you got Qual and Quahal. You got Qual, Qualal. They all derive from two letters, and then they become three letters. So when we understand Aish and Ish, that these are the same words, because if you was a person looking from the outside, you see that anytime the early humans existed, they had to exist with what? Fire. There was no survival without the fire.
Well, we're also Yah's little lancers, we're his workers.
We get into that. So, in it, if somebody was to observe us, if an alien was to fly down now and look at early humans, they will associate them with fire, because everywhere you see fire, there's humans. Because they needed it for survival. So now we go into the spiritual connotation, or the spiritual aspect of what fire denotes. And the symbolism is powerful, right? It represents a divine spark, creativity, and inspiration. And just like fire ascends, so does man when he searches for the Creator. Fire goes what? To the heavens, right? And in it, when that fire is ascending, it's trying. It's not really reaching the heavens. It's falling short. But it's the process of what man goes through. Because he has a divine spark inside of him that is constantly trying to ascend to the Creator and reach and become one with him. And this is our inspiration at times. This is how we got to think about it, because that represents the creativity of who we are, that fire. And we got to place it in a certain place. So in our journey, we're always constantly searching to ascend to the Creator. But fire also represents enlightenment. We are searching to be enlightened. So now, when the Most High says, do not kindle fire, now we're talking about a fire that's outside of ourselves. And the first time you see a fire outside of yourself is when we got casted out of the garden. Because the Almighty had breathed life into us as individuals. And anytime you blow a divine spark or blow fire or a spark, what does it do? It ignites. So automatically our spirit ignited. But when we were in the garden, when you hear the Most High walking with us and talking with us, and then all of a sudden we ate of the fruit, Yah was distant from us. You start to hear how far he was. And now we got to come to visit us. So now that fire is outside of self, so the Sabbath is representing that, hey, though you may prep a fire before the sun go down, do not prep one today. Because you have to have a trust in the fire that's within you as an individual. A human lives because he produces heat. There were things inside of you that produce heat. And that's why life is on earth. It is earth's atmosphere that causes life and heat. So we are almost like this internal fire that takes on this light or this divine entity that the Creator has put inside of us to ignite something inside of us. And on that day, the Yah is asking you as an individual, don't externalize your fire, internalize your fire. Because many of us are always looking for outside help. But in truth, that fire that's in you, that divine spark or that inspiration lies within you as an individual. So the Sabbath day isn't for the external fires or creating these fires. But the word he used to spark is ba'ar. It's a spark. But it kind of correlates what we're talking about today because the word ba'ar or bor means a boorish man. Someone who doesn't have enlightenment. So you as an individual, you have to think that sometimes enlightenment is itself. You can go on the internet and look up all the things you want and to figure out things about your life. But in truth, the enlightenment comes and that fire comes from where? Inside of self. One thing I learned about meditation is you can never teach nobody how to meditate. Why? It's personal. It's something that you got to understand. You can help interpret dreams and get them on the right path, but symbolism doesn't mean the same to every individual. And this is one thing we have to realize. And we want to also understand the aspect of what fire does. Fire can purify. It can bring light to darkness. But one thing about fire that we try to avoid is what? It's destructive. So man, it's a fight between enlightenment and destruction. Did that symbolize man? Because if you had a fire that's out of control, which we know here, then it could be destructive, correct? Fire has to be contained. And this is what we are a certain people because we have to, in order for us to exist, we have to destroy a little. We have to find a perfect balance between destroying for survival and just absolute destruction. So when Yah calls you to come in for the Sabbath, it's not an option. It is something that you have to do. It's something that you have to do because it's beneficial to you. As Elder Lion said, it's beneficial to you. And sometimes we don't understand the benefit because we're always on the outskirts or we want to inject and push ourselves away from the masses because we want to put so much emotions inside of what we are and everything surrounds us. So no longer does it surround God, it surrounds you now. And once you become the primary focus, you have lost the divine spark. Because that spark represents who the Creator is. When you rise up in the morning, you are destined to create for Yah. That's why building this is not nothing small. Being a part of Goshen and living in Goshen is not nothing small. This is something that is ordained. It's ordained. It's not an option, but it's option to those who don't have that spark of creativity. And we got to think about that. Now, immediately it goes into the building of the temple, and I'm going to begin to close out. But the next just position next to the fire and the Sabbath goes into building the temple. And why is that? Because our purpose is always divine. And it should always be divine. The best way to get out of depression is always asking, what is my divine purpose? And how do I get there? How do I help others? Because this is our purpose. When you start, everything is me, how I feel, then you are going to lose yourself completely. You're going to lose the whole existence of being a Hebrew, of being a child of the Creator. And in it, he says, I don't want just anybody. Because remember, we said the fire represents inspiration. You don't need to be inspired by how somebody make your haters your motivators. Anytime somebody tell you that, they failed. You focusing too much on somebody else. You want to impress people that don't like you. You're trying to impress people that don't impress Yah. Impress yourself. Step back outside of yourself and say, damn, I did that. But when you over-emotionalize things, then you cannot create because you become stagnant because you're always worried about what others think of you. And then in chapter 36, the Almighty says to us, he says, I place a special spirit in Bezalel in the Holy Hour. So now all of this is lined up. He says, the Sabbath, how do you do the Sabbath? Is a testimony of his great glory. It's a gathering. Right? So think about it. His testimony, his gathering. Don't create fires outside of yourself. Internalize your fire, your desire. Allow the divine inspiration to be from that divine spark who is the creator. And even all your little children cartoons used to teach you about this. When we dealing with the Transformers, they had the all spark. The all spark. It was a spark that existed in Cybertron, which represented heaven, and it would come down and make robots. And then when the all spark dies, it goes back and it brings back information that we all trying to internalize because everybody in here is trying to figure out what life is about. And you can't figure it out by yourself. You need others. You need to relate to others. You need to congregate with others to figure it out. So he says, I place my spirit in Bezalel, which means in the shadow. So we talk about the psyche. The psyche, we said there's two aspects of the psyche. There's Basana and what? The shadow self. Bezalel means in the shadow. So most psychologists and analytical people say that in your dark side of who you are, the things that you hide from people is your creativity. Lies your creativity and it's what makes you different. And sometimes the persona is what everybody else accepts. Now think about this. Everybody makes science objective, meaning that a group of people have to agree with it. But in truth, subjectivity is what creates the elite scientists. Nobody agreed with Tesla. And here you go, years later, figuring out Tesla was right. Or all the scientists are right. All the people in the Bible correct in so many ways. You start to study stuff and you're like, wow. Because it's what? It's based off of a personal feeling because you and your relationship with God is what? Personal. You think the prophet was objective? It was something that God dealt with him and told him that, hey, this is not the way. And everybody else didn't like it because it wasn't the social norm of Babylon. It wasn't what everybody else accepted. Stop trying to accept what everybody else has. When you go to school, you go to a public school, them fringes should be dangling.
That's right.
The kippah should be adorned. Because if not, then you're not a man to me, you're just a follower. And you're trying to externalize your fire. You want to be accepted by the outside source instead of being the force and the source to everybody else to ignite their flame to come back to the Creator. So sometimes every dark aspect of what you've been through as a human being, you shouldn't always be sad about it because in truth, when you look through that shadow, you start to realize what Yah is creating you into that made you different. Every pain, every part of suffering you have been through as an individual is part of your creativity and your creativeness. You cannot shun it as an individual. You cannot walk away from it. And then he said he put the spirit in the holy app in the Father's tent. We just talked about building a tabernacle unto Yah. Because in truth, you cannot measure your gift unless you're around people. And what do I mean by that? You probably had an epiphany that something was deep. But then you go online or go anywhere, and you're not around people, it's deep to you, but it ain't that deep to everybody else. So now you got to compare yourself and understand where you at in progression. And you only can do that by being around people. So when Yah calls this assembly, he's saying, gather yourself. And yes, I created something about you that's special, but also measure up stuff as a collective whole. One thing I like about basketball is that fact that Everybody, when they play by themselves, they're the greatest, right? Everybody, right? Listen to how the kids talk. Yo, I'm schooling you, man. Everybody think they're a point guard. Everybody. You ain't a point guard until you get what? A team. Then you start to figure out really what position you play in life. You figure out what your strong point is. And that's the power of brotherhood. That's the power of gathering. And when you find out that somebody can dish the ball better than you, that shouldn't bring you down. Because you got to understand your purpose. It might be to get boards. And I use this analogy because I want you to understand that. Look at Draymond Green statistically. He may not be the same, but before, his statistics don't add up to his value to the team. So sometimes you have to sacrifice the glory or receiving all praise to make that team work. And I want you as individuals, I want you to dig deep down inside of yourself. Never look at your pain as something that destroy you. Never come into the Sabbath of the Most High worrying about what others have done to you. But remember, this is a day of focusing. This is the aid, the adat. This is the congregating of testimonials and receiving the blessing of God. This is the Quahar, the holy gathering of the shepherd who has put us here. And our divine purpose is to gather for him. And he said he wanted the willing heart. And he says it more than once in this portion. He said he wanted the willing heart. Never force nobody into your life.
Oh, yeah.
Never get mad about something somebody doesn't want to do. They're not the willing heart. And I want you to realize power, right? Power is an expression of what you attract, not what you chase. Think about that. And it may not work in all scenarios. But power is an expression of what you attract. If you have power, you will attract certain things to you. You don't have to chase anything in life except righteousness. No woman, nothing. No man, anything. And as a wife, you have to live under the auspices of your man. That's different. I want you to acknowledge that as an individual. There's people that's going to drop off and fall off from this gathering, this whole movement, bit by bit, because it's only based on what? The willing heart. And that's exactly what we want. People say, well, why don't y'all do this and do that? More people, we want people that want to come. If the conversation has to be more than once on why you should come, it's not worth it. People are going to come because they have the willing heart. They understand what it takes. All that other stuff, that life is falling apart. Sodom and Gomorrah is on the other side. And outside of my children in California, I'm going to ask you, anybody heard of a man called Fallon Fox? Fallon Fox. Now, and I'm going to show you the corruption of the world, right? Immediately as a man, you get locked up for putting your hands on a woman. If you call the cops, somebody got to go to jail. That's the rule. If you call the cops for domestic violence, somebody has to go to jail, you or him. So, in it, Fallon Fox is a MMA fighter, a woman MMA fighter, but there's a twist about her. She's a transgender. She's a male. Yeah, he's a male. One of the fights crushed the girl's skull. Do you think that they would say, no, you can't fight? No, you shouldn't go on with this? No! People are applauding this. She crossed that line. He crossed that line and made a stance for who he is. He's an X. He's not anything. Yeah. All over in schools now, transgenders are breaking female records in track and field. It is. But don't speak against it. Because society is deeming that it's worthy. You could destroy a woman if you act like a woman. Now think about the society we ushering in as a people. When Abraham spoke to Lot, he said, you pick the area. Abraham knew what he was going to pick. He knew the spirit of Lot. Lot said, I went over there. Where he was pointing towards? Sodom and Gomorrah. Abraham said, I'll stay right here in the country. We're not forcing anybody, a willing heart. And if anything, brothers and sisters in a relationship, don't ever chase somebody. If you have to chase somebody to like you, when they get with you and the things ain't like you thought it was, they're going to have resentment towards you. They're going to develop a strong resentment. You be like, I knew I should have got with you. So he's telling me, I knew before, I messed up. You know, vice versa. Or you as a man, like, I shouldn't have forced that woman to be with me. I messed up. A lot of things that naturally happen. All praise to the supreme intellect of the universe. Y'all, our forefathers. Y'all, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. Adon, do you have anything to speak on?
No, I think that you did enough. That was good.
Hallelujah. Let us all rise and face Jerusalem.